We're talking football with Andy Mitten, who's down under in Brisbane, where he's going to be following Manchester United on their summer tour. Andy, good morning to you. How are you doing?
Hello, nice to speak to you. I'm fine, thanks.
How is Brisbane?
I've not been into the city. I spoke to Robbie Fowler, who's the new Brisbane Raw manager, yesterday. I'm just out of the city. I've been in Sydney and I'm heading across to Perth on Thursday ahead of Manchester United's first game. They play against Perth Glory, who are an A-League side, on Saturday. Then they play Leeds United, and then I'm going on to Singapore. The tour then goes to Shanghai, then I'm off to Oslo. So I'd like to say it's an eagerly anticipated pre-season tour, but I've never really known the mood to be so flat and unoptimistic among Manchester United supporters. And I think it's going to be a tour which is heavily scrutinised. Manchester United's two most expensive players, Paul Pogba and Romelu Lukaku, they're on the tour. There's some speculation that Pogba wouldn't travel, and both of them want to leave the club. This is a team that finished sixth last season, which have signed two young players, promising, but I think if you ask most United fans on the transfer activity so far in the close season, they'd be pretty underwhelmed by it. The big change promised by Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has yet to materialise, because it's very difficult for Manchester United to get their exceedingly well remunerated players off the books. Nobody wants them because they've been terrible for the last year.
That's definitely an issue, and it's interesting that the mood of flatness, that's from the fans you're talking about as much as anything, because we always assume these tours happen and the Man United fans come out, everything is always a sellout and there's always excitement, almost irrespective of what's happening on the field, but that might not be the case anymore.
Well, Perth's got the biggest Mancunian expat population in the world, so there's a huge supporters club there. And these are people who, when Man United played in Shanghai 3 years ago, 40 of them travelled 8 hours because they considered it to be a local game. So there are die-hard fans there. I don't think the game is quite sold out, but other issues can cloud that, such as high ticket prices, because Manchester United are so expensive to get to play in your stadium. That's because traditionally Manchester United are one of the best teams in the world. Certainly when they played here in 1999, they were the best team in the world. They just won the treble. When they played here last in Australia in 2013, they were the English champions. David Moyes had just taken over. Nobody could have foreseen what was to come. I think the mood is in a state of flux. The fans definitely are not feeling optimistic. The players, well, they need to prove themselves. They finished the season dreadfully with 2 wins out of 12 games. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, he needs to prove himself, because if United do not start the season well, the online moaning which you're seeing, that will start to translate into real life. Because at the moment, you're seeing people complaining online, you're seeing Glazer out hashtags. That's not really translating into the mood on the ground. I think United fans at the game will be supportive when the season starts. They'll hope Aaron Wan-Bissaka does well. They'll hope Dan James does well. They'll hope that those players who finish the season in such a thoroughly abject manner can come good. People like Marcus Rashford, who were terrible, they've got to find the form again. Ole Gunnar's got to find the form. I think the best case scenario for United fans is a repeat of when Ole Gunnar Solskjaer arrived. But there are questions, and relevant questions. He's an inexperienced manager. They haven't recruited well. I feel that if the team don't start well, then there are some serious problems. And somebody very close to the first team said to me at the end of the season, we'll be lucky to finish above Wolves and Leicester next year. I'm quite optimistic as a person. I'd like to think that David De Gea cannot be as bad as he was towards the end of the season. I don't have a huge downer on every single player like some Manchester United fans have. I think football can turn pretty quickly. And I remember Barcelona 2 seasons ago, the fans were up in arms. They wanted the president out. They weren't convinced that Valverde was the right manager. And then Barca won the first game and the second and the third. And by the time they got to the 7th game with 7 wins, the protest had completely melted away. I don't think this Manchester United team are going to be winning their first 7 games. But I think they've just got to be starting a lot better than they finished the last season. I don't think they'll win the league, but I'd like to see signs that there's some improvement there. And if they're going to go down the route of buying young players, young British players, fast young players, then at least that is something to hold on to. At least it's a chance to recover some of the identity that has been absolutely lost with big name signings who completely failed.
I guess on that Barcelona comparison, Andy, if you gave Manchester United the option of substituting any bit of disquiet that currently exists in the dressing room for mayhem on the stands, they would probably take that at this point. They would probably take a settled, strong squad.
Yeah, and they don't have that. And they're struggling to get rid of the players who don't feature because they're sat on huge contracts. I mean, on paper, I don't think the Manchester United squad is a complete disaster. But those players, they've not been performing to their potential. And that's why rival teams don't want to sign them, especially on the wages that they're on. But this is still the squad which in January and February went away to Arsenal, went away to Chelsea and won, went away to PSG. OK, Manchester United were completely outclassed in that game, but they were doing well. Now, Solskjaer thinks that they ran out of steam, that they weren't fit enough. He's pushing them hard pre-season. He wants a fitter team. He wants to play an attacking game. He was the one who personally pushed through Aaron Wan-Bissaka. And he was saying to people at Crystal Palace, when I played, we had Gary Neville darting right up and down the right all the time. Even if he didn't have the ball, he was an outlet. And I spoke to some United players 6 or 7 weeks into Solskjaer's tenure, and they were saying he wants the fullbacks pushing right up. We like that because there's an outlet there. We didn't have that under Jose Mourinho. Since then, something's clearly gone wrong. Solskjaer thinks it's fitness. He's trying to get the players fit, but they will be judged by results. If 6 games in, they've won 4, they've lost 1, they've drawn 1, people could handle that. If 6 games in, the 13th in the table, that's when I think you'll see real life dissent among the fans.
The fitness thing is always really interesting, pardon me, because it's one of the oldest tricks that a new manager comes in and says this squad isn't fit enough, and yet if you're being optimistic, there is a clear pattern recently with other managers who've inherited a team that played a different style of play and who weren't the fitness required for the type of game plan that you're looking at. I'm thinking here specifically of Liverpool. When Klopp comes in, a bunch of players got injured almost immediately upon his arrival in the middle of the season because they were being asked to do different things. Now, it's not that the players weren't fit under Brendan Rodgers, it's that they were fit for a different type of game. And you can make that parallel and go, this is really a ground zero, it's a restart for Solskjaer. But his window, because the way last season finished, is actually very short. He's got to get them performing inside the first 6, 8, 9 games.
He has. He absolutely has, because otherwise he's going to be the one who's subject to the abuse. And he's a club legend, but that won't matter. This is Manchester United. He's got to be at the top of the league, pushing. I don't think anyone really expects United to finish above Liverpool and City this season, but there's got to be some signs there. It's got to be much better than the dreadful football we saw towards the end of Mourinho's time, towards the end of Louis van Gaal's time. There's got to be some form of identity to hold on to. I think the fans will be quite patient if they see that. If they see that Dan James is good in 2 out of 4 matches, because we still know he's a young player. But let's not pretend Manchester United have not been in this situation for 25 years. Fans are cutting them slack because they need to, because they failed. 6 was nowhere near good enough. They weren't scoring enough goals. They were conceding far too many goals. I'd still expect new signings to come in. I'm told, and I wrote a piece last week, that Harry Maguire wants to join Manchester United. I wrote about a call that Ferguson made to him in 2011. But there is an impasse there because Leicester want 20 million more than Manchester United are prepared to pay. But if this tour goes badly, if Manchester United were to lose games against vastly inferior opposition, then the dissent is only going to build, and the pressure's going to build. If United are to lose Paul Pogba, you're looking at a potential basket case here before the season has started, because people heard Solskjaer say, some of these players will not play for me again. And then they're seeing them start the pre-season, and that doesn't instill any confidence. And Solskjaer does not have the bank of credit that any of the previous United managers had. Ferguson could get rid of Hughes, Kanchelskis and Ince in the summer of 1995, and fans questioned it, and fans were outraged. But he was Ferguson. He'd won doubles. This is Solskjaer, who's managed in Norway and failed as Cardiff City manager. The critics will be very quick to come out the blocks.
How much do you think Manchester United are now regretting what happened around deadline day last summer? The fact that they potentially tried to get Harry Maguire and failed. Obviously, Raphael Varane's name was mentioned. That potentially was never an option for him to leave Real Madrid to go to Manchester United. But it seems that the damage of last year is still precipitating into this transfer window.
Well, I'm told United were prepared to pay 100 million for Varane last year, and I believe that. I'm also told that Jose Mourinho changed his tune quite late in the transfer window and said that he wanted Harry Maguire. He hadn't pushed for that early on. I also believe that. I was there in America. I was speaking to people on the pre-season tour. I could see how thoroughly unhappy Jose Mourinho looked. I think at least Solskjaer will cut a happier figure. He'll try and inspire some optimism, but results are everything here. Fans will not buy it if they've got a smiley manager who manages a team who doesn't win games. They need more than that. And Mourinho was a disaster a year ago, and he would say, with good reason, but United would say, well, you didn't tell us that you wanted these players. United are trying to sign Maguire. They do want an extra central defender, but look at it from the club's perspective as well. They've got 6 central defenders. Looking at it in the most optimistic way, Axel Tuanzebe, very good player. He's captained every single Manchester United side, apart from the first team. He's had a good season away at Aston Villa. Best case scenario, he does well. He gets into the first team. Aaron Wan-Bissaka does very well. Dan James does. Suddenly you can put a more slightly optimistic view on everything. But so many things could go wrong as well. Paul Pogba wants to leave. He's the best player. Technically, he's the best player, even if he's wildly inconsistent, and has pretty much failed since he became a Manchester United manager, because he's been brilliant in some games, but he's not been anywhere near as consistent as he needs to be.
Paul Maguire was saying on one of our shows last week that they'd be idiots to not get rid of Paul Pogba at this point. What do you make of that?
Well, first, when you say Paul Maguire, for a Paul Maguire in Manchester United's defence at the moment. I think you can argue Pogba's case pretty strongly both ways. I think he's complicit in the club's failure. He should help getting his way out of it. I also think when you've got a player managed by Mino Raiola, this is what you get. You shouldn't be surprised. He puts his players first. The clubs are his clients, but the players are his main clients. And he doesn't really care much for Manchester United's success. He cares more for his players' success. Pogba has not done enough with Manchester United. This was a guy, when he arrived, people thought the team would be really rebuilt about him. I still think Ed Woodward hopes for that to be the case. To this day, Pogba is the man who sells the most shirts with his name on the back, mainly among younger Manchester United supporters. But when he comes out and says he wants to leave, the fans then say, well, if he wants to go, let him go. We only want players who want to play for us. But that actually strengthens Pogba's position and weakens United's position, because United will be felt more under pressure to get rid of the player. It's an absolute mess. We can't pretend otherwise.
Another line that's in the newspapers this morning is Andy Herrera saying that the club arrived late. Manchester United arrived late, and by that point he had already decided to join Paris Saint-Germain, suggesting perhaps that Manchester United could quite easily have kept Andy Herrera. Like, is that something that's seen as a failing, or in your view is it like we were good to get rid of him off the books and into another club?
I know Andy. I know people at United. I know Andy's agent. I was interviewing Andy when he was at Athletic Bilbao. I remember going to Real Sociedad away in 2013, and Manchester United senior staff knowing that I'd been to see Andy earlier on that day and asking me my thoughts on things. There's often 2 versions of the truth in football. With Andy, I think there are 3 versions of the truth. United felt that he was excessive in his demands. I'm not even sure if Andy knows this. United also felt that, given his age and his body type, you weren't going to see a player who was improving. Andy felt that he didn't get an offer, that he didn't feel loved. The offer, when it came in, was too late. I can understand if you've not got an offer and your contract's about to run out, that you instruct your agent to find other opportunities. Andy was very happy in Manchester. His family were happy in Manchester. His child was born in Manchester. I spoke to him many times. There were times when things could have gone better for him. It was pretty complicated for him under Louis van Gaal. There's 3 sides of the story here. If Andy does really well for PSG, people will be saying what a mess United have made. If he doesn't, then hindsight will say that we were right to get rid of him. He was a popular player. He wasn't Roy Keane, though. I like him. I think he was a good player for Manchester United. But depends whose version of the truth you believe as to how much United wanted him and how much he wanted to stay at United.
Just on a final point, Andy, before we let you go, you were writing a piece for 442 this week about Manchester United's first trip down under in 1967 involving Paddy Crerand getting confronted by a robber or something. What happened on that occasion?
Well, a lot happened on that trip. A lot tends to happen on these trips to Australia. In 1999, Ferguson didn't travel, and the players' attitude was, while the cat is away, the mice will play. Those players, your Giggses, your Coles, your Yorks, they will say it was the best trip they have ever been on in their lives. They frequented the nightclubs of every city they went to. They had a wonderful time playing cat and mouse and dodging Steve McLaren, who had absolutely no power over them whatsoever. And their argument was, we've just won the treble, we're in Australia, we can do whatever we like. Then when David Moyes went and he took the team onto Bondi Beach to train, and Manchester United security said, no, you can't take Manchester United players onto the beach here. And David said, well, I did it with Everton. And they said, well, this isn't Everton. Moyes, who'd just taken over, took the players onto Bondi Beach. Hundreds of people surrounded him. The training session was impossible to have. Back in 67, United players, they stayed above a pub in Coogee Bay. They were sponsored by a tobacco company. Assistant manager Jimmy Murphy, he'd have a few pints each morning in the scruffiest pub in the area. He would get all the cigarettes from the sponsors. He'd hand cigarettes out to whoever wanted them. Crerand told me that not every Manchester United player smoked at the time, so there was this huge build-up of cigarettes in the assistant manager's room. And then Crerand one night was accosted by a robber. He broke into his room. Crerand gave chase slowly. He wasn't the quickest player. He was just about to catch him, and the robber turned round to him and put a pistol to him, said, you come any closer, I'm going to shoot you. And the robber had actually taken some of the possessions from some of the players. So whatever happens on this trip, and I can see things happening in the social media age where everything's going to be magnified, I'd be absolutely stunned if someone pulled a pistol on a Manchester United player. However, if you speak to some of the fans, they wouldn't mind that happening to shock them into performing.
That is amazing, and the 2000 trip sounds absolutely spectacular. The 99 trip, I presume there's nothing in that whole row. I don't know if you've seen the back pages. Certainly the tabloids in the UK are all leading with the row between Pogba and Jesse Lingard, where Lindelof has to step in. It looks like absolutely nothing, and yet it came out of Manchester United's official social media channel. So, is there anything in this?
I don't think there's anything in it. I think Pogba and Lingard get on well. I think there's always creative tensions in a dressing room. We're not talking about Roy Keane and Gary Pallister, who didn't speak to each other for 18 months here, and many others I could mention which never get out in the public domain. These rows are normal. I wouldn't read too much into it. People have played it up a bit because A, there's not much happening, and B, it's on United's official channel, which have been very quiet recently. I wouldn't read too much into it.
All right, Andy, good stuff. Enjoy your trip. Thanks a million.
Thank you.
That's Andy Mitten there, live from Australia this morning, and giving us an update on how things are going at Man United.
I was hoping he'd say that, yeah, Paul Pogba and Jesse Lingard have always hated each other, and finally the world can know the secrets of Manchester United.
Yeah, so what do you think is going to happen, Man United? We're exactly 1 month and 2 days away from kick-off in the Premier League season. I'm now thinking that Paul Pogba will start the season at Man United, and that he will transfer on the last day of the transfer window. That this is going to run the whole way to...
Doesn't the transfer window close before the season these days? Then they make that change, so I'm not sure if that can happen. Either way, if he's going to leave, they need to get rid of him now. There's no point in him coming on a tour, because we've seen this happen in recent times with clubs, where their season can be over before it starts in terms of actually contending for the Premier League title. I know that's not what the expectation is at Old Trafford this season, but think of Jose Mourinho's last season at Chelsea. He lost that in his pre-season tour. Things had started to go AWOL in his pre-season tour.
Yeah, it's the 8th of August, you're right. Well, I mean, I actually think that that deal could get done in the matter of a phone call, because obviously he wants to go and there's two suitors, but...
I get the sense from Paul Pogba's body language that something was close to happening. That frustration that we saw him display at the airport a couple of days ago is a sign of a man who is, as I say, frustrated, and something is close or something is about to happen, it doesn't strike me as the sort of anger that he might display if he's forced into staying at Manchester United. But you do get the sense that something is close, and if the tour had happened a week later, he might have sealed away from Manchester United, because he clearly doesn't want to be there. He's pretty much said as much.